everybody, it's Randy with Carchaeology, and I figured it was about time that we did a bit of a recap on what has been happening with the 1940 Mercedes. So let's start from the very beginning. So this car was discovered in rural Michigan. It was sitting in a barn along with some other interesting cars, and it was told that it had been sitting there since the 1960s, which is really quite crazy. Now, the gentleman that owned the car had passed away, and I purchased it from the family of the family of the owner, with the help of a friend of mine, Mike, out there in the area, that was able to deal with them face to face on my behalf. And magically, somehow, planets all collided, and this baby came together, and this car arrived here at the lab shortly thereafter. Now, the car had been sitting for a long time. It took quite a bit to get it out of the garage. We found a shipper that could pick it up quickly, could bring it out here. And at the time of the purchase, I've got to be honest, I really didn't know what I had just bought. I knew it was a Mercedes convertible. I was told it was probably around 1940, but there really wasn't much more to know about it. And the images that I had seen it when I had decided to pursue it weren't much better than what you see in the background right here. I could tell it was a red convertible. They told me it was a Mercedes, and I could see some unique things with it that made it look like something special, something different than a normal factory Mercedes. I didn't even know what model it was until it arrived here in California sometime later. The one thing I did discover when it was pulled out of the garage is that there was a tag on the body, on the driver's side front panel, that said Romich Carrosserie. And that absolutely blew my mind because I know Romich. I've had two other Romich cars in this very same garage before. I've even traveled to Germany, seen the Romich Museum. I've seen what's left of the Romich building. It's something that I knew. However, what I didn't know was that Romich was involved with the build of a custom Mercedes. In fact, when I called my friends at the Romich Museum, where they have the archives of the company, I said, "Have you ever heard of a Romich Mercedes?" Their answer immediately was no. And then I sent them pictures of it, and the phone rang 30 minutes later, and they were blown away. Now, they've dug through the archives to find some information. There are some records in some ledger books of a Mercedes Cabriolet going through the Romich workshops at some point, but they haven't had a chance to really dig deeply through everything within the archives to come up with much more than that. So once the car arrived here and I realized just how spectacular it was, I went absolutely nuts with research. Now, the goal was to find out as much as I possibly can about the car, and it's something that I'm still searching about today. However, I have found out a lot of amazing stuff. Thanks to the Mercedes archives, the car was delivered to Berlin, Germany on March 15th, 1940 as a Pullman limousine. Now, that's the long wheelbase 320, the biggest Mercedes that they made at the time in the 320 range. And obviously, it's not a Pullman limousine now. So the question is, well, when and who did the conversion on this car? Now, obviously, with the Romich badge, we were able to, know at least where it was finished. But I had to dig further because Romich didn't have a whole lot of information on it. So thanks to a viewer on YouTube, I was turned on to a report that had been delivered or written for the Berlin Technical Institute on the history of coach building. And through that report, there were records from the designer for Romich, a man by the name of Johannes Beeskow. And in Beeskow's records and in his memoirs that are all kind of a part of this particular report, there are records of his of the most important cars that he was involved with during his career. Now, his career was a very long one, and he was involved with several coach builders and several companies within Germany, mostly in the Berlin area. He started with a company called Joseph Noose. That ended up turning into a company called Erdman and Rossi. And through Erdman and Rossi, Beeskow really flourished. His career really took hold. He ended up coming up with some absolutely spectacular bodied cars, a lot of them for heads of state, for military leaders, things like that, all through his career there at Erdman and Rossi. And a lot of the cars that he designed during that period have an extremely similar style to the Mercedes that we've got here at the lab. In fact, so similar that it's my theory that this car was actually started at Erdman and Rossi, or at the very least, the concept for it and perhaps the customer for it was done by Beeskow during his time at Erdman. Now, World War II came around and wiped out Erdman and Rossi and stopped production of damn near everything during that period if it wasn't for war use. In fact, this car, when it rolled off the line in March of 1940 as a Pullman limousine, that was right before they shut off the tap for passenger car production at Mercedes and went solely to military work. So anyway, during the war, everybody kind of shut down. Fortunately, Erdman and Rossi, or at least Romich, or Beeskow, was kept busy with doing repairs and things like that. In fact, there's records that Beeskow was given the approval by the military leaders to keep working during his period there. But Erdman and Rossi was pretty much bombed out and destroyed. So I've heard tale of Beeskow having another location where perhaps he did some work. But by the time the war was over, well, Erdman and Rossi was done and Beeskow joined forces over at Romich. So through Beeskow's documents and through his history that are in this Berlin Technical Institute report, in this record of cars, it shows two cars that he calls the last. There's a Maybach. Here's a photo of the Maybach. And then there's a Mercedes Sport Cabriolet. And that's this car right here. And both of those are marked the last. Now, my assumption is that those are the last of the Erdman and Rossi contracts that he completed, because everything from that point forward was work that's known to be attributed to him at Romich. So I think the car was completed at Romich. In fact, I know it was completed at Romich because another viewer had from Brazil, of all places, sent me a photo of this car when it was done, parked in front of the Romich workshop that's dated 1948. And that lines up perfectly with the archives or the information that Beeskow himself put down that was used in this report. So, we know it was built in 1940 as a Pullman limousine. We know that it went to Berlin. We don't know who ordered it, and Mercedes isn't about ready to tell us, because there is a chance that, well, it was sent to somebody of a high-ranking military official thing. And obviously Mercedes wants to distance themselves from anything that's regarded to that period of time. In fact, we all kind of do. So I don't know who ordered it originally, and I still don't know who contracted with Beeskow and with Romich to complete this car and turn it into the Sport Cabriolet that you see here today. The other thing I don't know is how or when it made it from Germany over to America. So the story that I have heard from the family that we got the car from was that it was purchased by the owner in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the 50s. So we know that it came over somewhere between 1948 and let's just call it 1958. So there's a 10-year period there, give or take, where it made the trip over here. Now, it's well known that a lot of cars and a lot of interesting artifacts made their way to the U.S. through U.S. servicemen that were stationed over there. In fact, some of the most incredible custom-bodied special Mercedes and other cars came over that exact way. In fact, there's one 540K that came over with a U.S. general or some high-ranking official that went on to be restored. It sold at auction for millions of dollars. The new owner took it to Europe to show it at a prestigious event there, and the German government seized it from him and took it and gave it back to the family that it was taken from back in the day. So there's some weird history when it comes to cars of this era that came out of Germany. Was it actually purchased by U.S. servicemen and brought over here? Or did somebody take it? And is there anybody over there that knows the car at all? Now, in order for something to end up going back to the family, well, they would have to prove that it was taken. And quite frankly, jurisdiction would not allow them to take it from my garage here in California. But if the car were to go back to Europe and there was some family record or some sort of proof that the car had been stolen during that period, well, then it would go back to the rightful owners, or at least his heirs. Now, I don't anticipate that happening. Obviously, there was a huge court case involved with that 540K, but that was a car that was worth millions and millions of dollars, and we're not dealing with that here. While it is an absolutely special, one-off, true one-of-a-kind coach-built Mercedes convertible, it's not worth $3 million or even $7 million, which is what that family got for that car when they finally sold it themselves at auction. So in any case, that's the history of the car as we know it right now. So it started out Berlin, 1940. It stayed within Berlin when the coach building was done. We know it was completed in around 1948. We believe that it came over to the U.S. in the 1950s, and then in the 60s, it went from Albuquerque, New Mexico, to rural Michigan, where it was found, stored in a barn for over 50 years. So other updates on the car is, well, what have we done to it since it came here? Well, first of all, besides all the research, which has been an incredible amount of time, I've done a lot of work on the car to kind of preserve it as it is, the best that I possibly can. Now, the tires that were on the car, well, they were toast. So I bought some new tires for it. I actually painted the wheels back to the original color. I aged them so it looks like they were on the car this time, the whole time. Looking at that period photo of the car in front of the Romich building in 1948, we believe that the original color was red, and it looked like the wheels matched at that time. It is a black and white photo, but looking at that photo and comparing it to other photos of other cars taken in front of the same building, it's not the darkest one of the bunch. So we feel confident both in looking at that photo and in looking at the car very closely that it's not been repainted since about 1948 when the bodywork was done. So preservation is kind of the goal. Now, the car really does need to be restored, or it deserves a full restoration if somebody was into that sort of a thing. But quite frankly, I don't have the wallet or the workshop to do a full restoration on this car the way that it should be done. So my goal is just to preserve it. I want to get it up and running and driving. Any missing parts I want to find and put back on the car. Or if it's a part that's not available, then it's something that we're having to remake. And I've done a fair bit of that with the help of one of my friends, a metal fabricator. These pieces were missing. We had those redone. The front bumper is in the process of being recreated. We've gone through and started to clean things and preserve things. The original wood dash, we're going to get in and do the same with the floors and the inner structure. The window regulators and stuff were out of the door and in the trunk. We're in the process of putting all of that back together. We're reworking some of the wood in the body so that the structure can remain sound. We're doing paint preservation things so that we can keep the paint from flaking off any more than it already has, as well as cleaning everything. Not restoring it, not making it perfect, but just preserving it so that it doesn't deteriorate any more than it has already. So it's out of the barn in Michigan. It's in a clean garage where I am keeping on it. I am touching every bit of it. I'm going to try to make it run, make it drive. We've got new brake parts that were sourced from Germany. We've got the engine turning. The engine has compression. When I was around front, you saw the funnel in the engine. I've just been pickling the engine with a penetrant so that we can get in there, make sure that everything is clean. So I've been filling it up. I've been cranking it over. Everything seems to be working in there. And very quickly, I think we'll be able to fire this engine up and see what it's really like. And then once the engine's fired, well, then we can get it to run and move under its own power. So those things are coming up very quickly here on the Carchaeology channel. And if you haven't been following along, hopefully this video has caught you up to date on everything that we've discovered and done with the car so far. There's a lot ahead with this car. Not only getting it started, getting the preservation all done, getting the car together, and then getting it out to the public is also going to be a very, very fun thing that I plan to share with you. In fact, we've had some discussions with the folks at the Mercedes Classic Center. They're in the process of putting together a new facility here in Southern California. They're going to be doing some different events down there, and there's a possibility we'll be able to bring the car down there, display it at one of their hosted events. And I'm also looking forward to perhaps bringing it to some of the big car events out here in California this year. So anyway, that's it. The Mercedes 320 update. Hopefully you followed along with my miscellaneous rambles there. And I hope you're as excited as I am about seeing the end of this story. Thanks so much for watching. Keep on digging them up and driving them, folks. Bye-bye.